paying attention, and really, we're more than halfway done. We're kind of on the last stretch of this, seeing that there are 31 chapters here. So we're kind of on the backward slope here, and so pretty interesting. This will be the first book that we've actually completed since I've been here, and done a lot of different studies, but 1 Samuel's been the first book that we really, as a congregation, have studied together, and I'm looking forward to moving on, because my plan is to go from 1 Samuel to 2 Samuel. And why stop at 1 Samuel? 2 Samuel's right there. Why stop at 1 Kings and 2 Kings? We just got to go through the whole thing there. So I'm looking forward to it. These are some interesting studies, and I just really appreciate this study. I appreciate everybody's participation in it. I know that afterwards sometimes people will come up and talk to me about various things and say, well, I didn't realize this, or I didn't know this before, or I've forgotten this. And that's like the beauty of studying a book, is that you just get so much more out of it than if I pick a passage. If I were to come and preach 1 Samuel 17 and just talk about David and Goliath, and then move on from there, and then go into 2 Samuel and talk about David and Bathsheba, you don't get everything in between. It doesn't mean as much. Whenever you got all of it together and you keep everything in the context, and you see growth, and you see all these different things, it just is a wonderful thing. You get this 360-degree view of the Bible, and that's just the wonderful thing about studying it. If you don't study it all, then you're missing out. You're only taking part of that angle. You need the whole thing. So, I just love that. We are right here in chapter 22. I've named this Doeg's Debacle, the Doeg Debacle. This is kind of hard when you're trying to come up with your own outline here of things and looking at. There's a couple of things that you could mention from 1 Samuel 22, but the main portion of this text is about Doeg. Now, if you go back to chapter 21, what happened with Doeg? Whenever David comes to Ahimelech, Doeg is there. He is there for some reason, for purification, something. It doesn't really say exactly what it is, but he's there being detained, and so he hears all that goes on, and this is the repercussions from that. So David's on the run. He went, we talked about the showbread. He ate the showbread. He got Goliath's sword, and now he is moving on. Look at the first few verses with me through verse 5. This is David starts to build an army. David, therefore, departed thence and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him. Now, when you look at the word brethren, we kind of look at that in a broad sense, because, think about it. We are brethren, right? And so we think about it in that regard. But this is literally talking about his brothers. Remember the brothers that were getting onto him whenever he was going up against, Goliath, and saying, we know why you're here. We know what you're doing. He's the youngest of them. Now his brothers are joining him, and that's something that it would be easy to miss. But, his brothers are here with him. Now, why is it that the brothers and his father, and all of them, everybody in his father's house has come, and they're with him? What's the point of all of that? Well, who hates him? The king. The king hates him. Now, you think the king has a lot of resources and could probably put any of those resources to use to, kill your family? Yeah, absolutely. Think about it. There's all these stories throughout time, and you're really, I look at stories in a different way. When you study the Bible and you look at stories that man makes up, I just look at it like this. Whenever someone's like, well, what about this story? Oh man, Harrison Ford, the fugitive. That's a great story, right? That's David. Like I look and go, that's in the Bible. All these things happen. You go and you can look at any story that man has made up, and you can go, oh, that's Jesus. Oh, that's Ruth. All that has already been done, and that's kind of the case here. You've got all these things going against David. Now, think about today. If the President of the United States hated you, what could he do to you? You could go on the run, and man, it would be hard for you, wouldn't it? Your family, if they would have to go on the run too. It would be a difficult thing. And that is exactly what's going on with David. You've got the most powerful man in the country that hates you and wants you dead. And so you're on the run, and therefore your family's going to have to be on the run. Verse 2, and everyone that was in distress, and everyone that was in debt, and everyone that was discontented gathered themselves unto him, and he became captain over them, and there were with him about 400 men. Now, this is just saying that everybody that basically had a problem with Saul, they were in debt, they were discontent, they had some kind of servitude with Saul. They found themselves an opening, and they said, let's join up with David. David is on the same side as us now, and you remember what everybody said about David. What Saul has killed what? His thousands. David is 10,000s. You hear that being chanted, and then you see a chance to go and to hang with David. Then what are you going to do? Yeah, I'll tell you right now. I know exactly where I would have been. I would have been right there with these guys. But like, yes. That sounds like a great place to be with David. Even if you're outnumbered, you think about David killed Goliath. David, you think David is the ultimate. And so you go and you spend time with David. You go and you be a part of his crew. Verse 3. And David went thence to Mizpah of Moab, and he said unto the king of Moab, let my father and my mother, I pray thee, come forth and be with you, till I know what God will do for me. And he brought them before the king of Moab, and they dwelt with him all the while that David was in the stronghold. And so, of course, his parents are probably up in years at this point, and they're not going to be able to move about like he's going to need to move about. And so they go to Moab, and he's asking for permission to leave his parents there and then go off and fight against Saul. Now, think about this. What's going on? He's going to a heathen nation and asking for help. And so he does this, but why would they accept it? Well, because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's actually the second title I had for this lesson was the enemy of my enemy is my friend. It comes up twice here in this chapter. But it comes up at the beginning, and it comes up at the end. But think about it. They go, they take his parents there until the whole mess is over. Verse 5. And the prophet Gad said unto David, abide not in the stronghold, depart, and get thee into the land of Judah. Then David departed and came into the forest of Hereth. So I want to make mention of this as we're going along. This is the wonderful thing about doing a study like this, is that you get to see all these different people. And you go and you read of the prophets, and you read of them doing different things. But, it's when you start putting them in the timeline that things start making sense. They make a little bit more sense, So Gad is a prophet. But then also you're going to find out, later on, who else is going to come in that's a prophet? Well, you got Nathan. Nathan is a prophet, comes to David. And so David deals with multiple prophets. All right. Look at the next section here. Doeg's declaration. Look at verses 6 through 10. And Saul heard that David was discovered of the men that were with him. Now Saul was sitting in Gibeah under the tamarisk tree in Ramah, with his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing about him. Now, we have pointed this out several times. Saul, when he is supposed to be the safest, he's surrounded by soldiers. What is he doing every time we see him? He's holding a weapon. He is. We talked about this, with the police officers and having their back to the door. They want to do that. They want to know who's coming in. But it's a little bit more. You're a little bit more at ease if you know that somebody is sitting there with a weapon. If you and your friends, I know a lot of my friends, we carry guns, and so you sitting there, and if you didn't carry one day, you go, hey, are you carrying today? And it's like, oh yeah, I am. Of course I am. And it's like, all right, well, you get to sit with your back to the wall. You be able to see the door. That's what your job is, because you just never know. You never know what's going to happen, and you can be a little bit more at ease. Saul is never at ease. Saul never is. He's always paranoid. He's never soothed by the fact that he's surrounded by his guard. Now, I think that there is somewhat of a reason behind this. Now, it's kind of a backwards reasoning here, but the reason I believe is that he has such a disdain for David. He thinks David is against him. Now, we know David's not against him. We know that David later on is going to have the opportunity to kill Saul, and he just won't do it. But David is not his enemy. Saul is his own enemy, is really what's going on. And so Saul, he doesn't like David. He thinks David's against him. Well, if you're thinking like that, and then, of course, he had his issues with his own son here in the same regard, and he's probably thinking, everybody is out to get me. He's just a paranoid guy. So anyway, so Saul heard that everybody was there. And it says here, and the men that were with him. So he knows that not only is David out there, but David has men. And these are men that typically would have thought of to be as, have some disdain for the king. All right. And Saul said unto his servants that stood about him, Hear now, ye Benjamites, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards? Will he make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds? Now, this is an interesting thing. It actually took me a few times to realize what's going on. I believe I've told you this, and this is just a real easy trick. Whenever you're studying the Bible, I've mentioned before, and I'm going to keep mentioning it to you and make sure that you know exactly how to do this. But man, read every passage at least 10 times before you ever really dig in. It took me about 5 times to read through this before I realized he is talking to all of these people that would have come from all the different tribes. And who does he call out? Benjamin. That's his own tribe. So he's talking to his servants, which would have been different people, and he calls out the Benjamites. Why? Because he's looking for loyalty here. He's looking for somebody to be on his side. He thinks, if anybody's going to be on my side, it's that of my own tribe. And so he's talking to all of his servants, but he says, all you Benjamites, do you think that David is going to reward you? Think he's going to make you captains over thousands, captains over hundreds? You think that's what's going to happen? He's going to give you vineyards? You think that's what's going to be the thing? No, he's not going to do that. Verse 8, that all of you have conspired against me, and there is none that discloseth to me when my son maketh a league with the son of Jesse. And there is none of you that is sorry for me, or discloseth unto me that my son hath stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait as at this day. So did you see what happened there? All of a sudden, he says, look, you're not going to get that stuff. You think that you're going to be captains, you're going to have vineyards. And he says, and that you've all conspired against me. You've done this. He said, nobody told me. Nobody told me that my son had gone in league with the son of Jesse. Nobody told me that he was that tight with David. Nobody told me that. And he says, and then he says, I'm sorry, but this is a funny phrase to me. But he says, and there is none of you that is sorry for me. No, come on, guys. It's like really narcissistic, isn't it? Nobody feels bad for me, you big baby. I mean, like, really? I mean, I've talked to people that were kind of like this, and you're like, really? Okay. Well, I definitely don't feel sorry for you now. I might have felt a little sorry for you before, but now that you're whining, and you're an adult, and you're whining, and you're just acting like a giant child, then I definitely don't feel sorry for you all of a sudden. But he says, look, none of you feel sorry for me, or discloses unto me that my son hath stirred up my servant against me. Now, what is he saying that Jonathan did? He said, Jonathan's the culprit. Jonathan's the one who's done this. My own flesh and blood is the one who turned David against me. And he says, and to lie in wait as at this day. So he thinks David's out there, he's waiting to kill me, and it's all Jonathan's fault. Man, that is the furthest thing from the truth, and we know it. But this is how messed up Saul's mind is. When you look through the scriptures and you find people, there are people in there that you go, wow, they're a little off. They're just a little off. Saul is, he's just psychotic. I don't know how else to say it. He is just way off his rocker, and it just doesn't. It's not good. Verse 9. Then answered Doeg the Edomite, who stood by the servants of Saul, and said, I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub. And he inquired of Jehovah for him, and gave him victuals, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. And so he's calling out to all these people who are his own countrymen and telling them what the way he feels about this whole situation. Says, nobody's told me anything. And then Doeg the Edomite speaks up and says, oh, I've got something for you. And he says, David went to see Ahimelech. Ahimelech gave him food, gave him a weapon, and inquired of God for him. Now, all that's true. But he says, look, I'll give you some information here. Now, I assume Doeg is doing this for his own benefit. He already knows Saul. He's one of Saul's servants beforehand. So we already knew all this. But he's probably doing this for his own benefit. All right, let's go to the next thing. Doeg's disgrace. Verses 11 through 19. Then the king set to call Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, the priests that were in Nob, and they came all of them to the king. So he calls all the priests from Nob to come and to meet him. And Saul said, Hear now, thou son of Ahitub. And he answered, Here I am, my lord. And Saul said to him, Why have you conspired against me, thou and the son of Jesse? And that thou hast given him bread and a sword, and hast inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me to lie in wait as at this day? So what does he say? Why are you conspiring against me? He doesn't, listen, when we jump to conclusions, we're going to get things wrong sometimes, right? We might get things wrong majority of the time. But, I've often used this phrase. I just realized I used a phrase this morning that, people around here hadn't heard before. I hope you've heard this one. But sometimes the only exercise people get is jumping to conclusions. That is really, and that is what's going on here. He's just jumping to a conclusion. Oh, he doesn't ask, could you tell me why you did this? I mean, Ahimelech could have just easily said what? Well, David said he was coming from you. And I just did all this because, I thought he was on a mission from the king. That's exactly what David lied to him and told him that. And so anyway, he could have easily said that. But moving on, he says, Then Ahimelech answered the king and said, And who among all thy servants is so faithful as David, who is the king's son-in-law, and is taken into thy counsel, and is honorable in thy house? So, almost kind of like, really? Of all of the people that you're going to point out, you're pointing out David? Who is more faithful than David? David has never done anything against you. This is an interesting thing because this is known far and wide, that David is faithful to Saul. Everybody knows it. Far and wide, the message has been spread that David is a faithful servant of the king. That's why Ahimelech doesn't ask anything whenever he comes and asks for all those provisions. He doesn't really give him much of a rebuttal. He just says, okay, let's just do this thing, But Ahimelech says, your servant is faithful. Verse 15, have I today begun to inquire of God for him? So is it today that I started inquiring of God for David? I've done this plenty of times, is the thought process. Be it far from me, let not the king impute anything unto his servant, nor to all the house of my father, for thy servant knoweth nothing of all this, less or more. So I don't have, don't hurt my house, don't hurt, us in general here, because I have known nothing of this. I don't know a single thing. Verse 16, and the king said, thou shalt surely die. Ahimelech, thou and all thy father's house. And the king said unto the guard that stood about him, turn and slay the priests of Jehovah, because their hand also is with David, and because they knew that he fled and did not disclose it to me. But the servants of the king would not put forth their hand to fall upon the priests of Jehovah. So, what is he asking? You kill them all. Kill all the priests. He even spells it out. Kill the priests of Jehovah. These are the priests of God. You kill them all. And what do they do? Well, they know better. Well, no, we're not going to kill the priests of God. They stand back. Nobody's going to do it. Nobody lifts a hand to do it. All right, verse 18. And the king said to Doeg, turn thou and fall upon the priest. And Doeg the Edomite turned, and he fell upon the priest, and he slew on that day 85 persons that did wear a linen ephod. And so 85 people, 85 priests are present, and actually technically 86. And 85 are killed. And so, here it is that he's told to kill them, and you go, why does he do this when everybody else won't? And the key is, well, he's an Edomite. Now, he doesn't care. He doesn't care about, you think about the Edomites. Who are the Edomites? Go back to Jacob and Esau. From Jacob comes Israel. From Esau comes Edom. Now, they're going to have troubles. The Israelites and the Edomites throughout time have trouble. You might remember this. I can't remember where it is exactly in Numbers, but just read through Numbers and you'll find it. But Moses goes and he asks to go through Edom. And he says, can we go through? And they say, nope, you can't come through. And he says, okay, well, look, if we come through and our animals, they drink your water, we'll pay for it. Just let us pass through. And Edom says, you remember what they say? You step one foot on our land, we're going to kill you. That's the Edomites. They hate Israel. And so whenever Doeg gets the opportunity and Saul says, kill them, that's exactly what he does. He doesn't waste any time. Matter of fact, you look at this, and evidently the priests don't lift a hand. They just die. I don't know if they ran or anything, but they just die there. It looks like they just kind of give themselves over to this punishment. But the priests die by his hand, but that's not the worst of it. Verse 19. And Nob, the city of the priests, smote he with the edge of the sword, both men and women, children and sucklings, and oxes and donkeys, and sheep with the edge of the sword. And so he utterly destroys the city of Nob. Now, if you go back to 1 Samuel 15, and you think about the irony here, what happened in 1 Samuel 15? What was he supposed to do? Saul was supposed to utterly destroy the Amalekites, and yet he does not. And then now, in chapter 22, he allows Doeg to utterly kill God's people. This is a awful and dangerous spiral that Saul is going down. All right, next section here. Abiathar escapes. Verse 20. And one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar told David that Saul had slain Jehovah's priest. And David said to Abiathar, I knew on that day, when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul, I have occasioned the death of all the persons of thy father's house. So, what does he say? I knew it. I knew when I saw Doeg, he knows who Doeg is. He goes, I knew when I saw Doeg that he would go back and tell Saul. And he says, it is my fault that all this happened. Now, I can respect this in David. David doesn't go, Doeg. Man, that's just a wicked man, He's just an awful human being. He is. It doesn't change anything. He takes responsibility for his actions in all this. And he sees Doeg and he goes, man, I knew he'd go back and tell Saul. Now, he couldn't have foresaw any of this stuff. But all these bad things happened for David, because of David, and David expresses, this is my fault. I think, before I get to that, let's look at verse 23. Abide thou with me, fear not, for he that seeketh my life seeketh thy life, for with me thou shalt be in safeguard. And so Abiathar is with David. David says, stay with me, because the same person trying to kill you is trying to kill me again. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. They are going to be in league together here, and so Abiathar is going to be with David from here on. Now, time for some application. I've got a couple of things to mention. There's probably more that could be said, but let me give you the two I've got. One, obey God over men. That's what, Doeg doesn't understand this statement. He doesn't understand. That's what, all those servants of Saul, all those soldiers, they actually followed this one. They said, we're not going to kill the priests. We're not going to do that. If Doeg knew who God was, who truly knew who God was, then he wouldn't have done this. You think about this in Acts 5, verse 29. Peter and the apostles answered and said, we must obey God rather than men. It is important for us to all remember this. At some point in time, we are going to be faced with a situation where we're going to have to remember this verse. All right, number 2. Always take responsibility for your actions. That's a hard one, isn't it? Sometimes, sometimes it's easy to do. Something happens and you go, oh yeah, I made a mistake, and you can kind of get away with that one a little bit. But sometimes the mistakes are bigger and costlier, and you're afraid to come out with the truth. You're afraid to come out with and take responsibility. And sometimes this we fight this one anyway. I think we have a tendency to blame our problems on other people. And so when something happens, we go, ugh, it was that person's fault, or if only you had done this, or if this had happened, to me, earlier in life, maybe it wouldn't be like this, or all kinds of different things that a person could come up with. But take responsibility for your own actions. The Bible has plenty to apply in this regard. Galatians 6:5, for each man shall bear his own burden. In Romans 14 verse 12, so then each one of us shall give account of himself to God. We're responsible for our own selves. We know this. We know several passages that go with this. But Ezekiel 18:20, we've used this a few times in this regard. What does it say here? The soul that sinneth, it shall die. The Son shall not bear the iniquity of the Father, neither shall the Father bear the iniquity of the Son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon him, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon him. One day, we are going to stand before God. And we can either stand before God and be confident that we've done what He has said, or we can stand before God and make excuses, which aren't going to work. And we go, oh, it was if it weren't for the elders, or if it wasn't for that preacher, or if it wasn't for brother or sister so and so, they put me in this bind, or whatever. You can blame anybody all you want to. But you need to remember, it's the soul that sins, it shall die. You take responsibility for your own self. Every one of us. I've learned this through preaching, that I would love to be able to get up here and to tell you what the Bible says, and for everybody to just go, oh, that's what the Bible says. Okay, I'm going to do that now. I'm here to tell you that is not what happens. I wish it were. This is what happens. I'll say it, and then someone will go, well, I've never heard that before, and then they might get upset, and then maybe a year later I'll say it again, and they'll all go, okay, all right, yeah, okay, and then sometimes I've even seen this where. And this happened at the last congregation where I taught something and taught something and taught something. And every time I taught it, someone got mad. And I thought, I can't help it. I'm supposed to teach this. And somebody got mad every single time. And then this other guy has come in and he teaches it. And then, he's saying the exact same thing I said. And then people go, oh, so maybe this is the thing. Like, oh, somebody else is saying the exact same thing. Okay, maybe we should accept it. And you know what? I'm happy that they're accepting things that But listen, it's not that easy. I mean, some people do. They hear it once, and then they're just like, yeah, okay, I shouldn't do that. You're right. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna make sure that I'm safeguarding my life from these things. And I love it when I see that. But that's not the average person. The average person is going to fight it. But here's the thing. I can't make anybody do anything. You know what I can do? I teach it, and then I need to live it. And hopefully, you'll hear it, and you'll live it as well. All we can do as Christians is tell people what the Word of God says, and then pray that people obey. You can't make them obey. Man, I wish you could, but you can't. You can't make anybody obey. We've got to remember it's our own responsibility here. The soul that sins, it shall die. You're not going to bear anybody else's iniquities. You'll bear your own. But think about this, on the positive side of that, the righteousness of the righteous shall be upon them. Be righteous. Follow the Word of God. Wholeheartedly serve Him. Brethren, I look out here and I see a lot of people who have already obeyed the gospel plan of salvation. And I'm very thankful for that. But, when we give the invitation and we look out and we see all these people and we look at brethren, here's the thing that we don't see. When you stand up here, anybody doing the devotional, you don't know what's going on with everybody. You don't know everything. I certainly don't know everything. And so somebody might be sitting here tonight just secretly writhing in spiritual pain because they have done something that they ought not, and they're stuck in some kind of sin that they need help getting out of. This invitation is for you. If you need to make things right, we'll be glad to help you out with that. We'll pray for you. We'll sit down, we'll open up the Word of God and study with you, help strengthen you. There's nothing shameful about coming down front and repenting of sin, no matter if you've been a Christian for a long period of time or you've never been a Christian, trying to make things right initially. There is no shame in that. You know what where the shame comes? The shame comes when you have sin and you don't repent of that. That's where shame is. And so, if you are in need of this invitation, it is now yours. Please take hold of it and please come forward as we stand and as we sing.